You often assume that presence comes and goes, that at times reality feels near and at other times it feels distant. This assumption rarely gets questioned. It operates quietly beneath ordinary thinking, yet a simple paradox appears. If something truly exists, how could it ever be absent? The Sufi philosopher Ibn Arabi challenged this unnoticed structure of thought. He did not ask how to reach reality. He asked whether the idea of separation from reality was ever valid. You speak of being present and not present. You speak of losing connection and finding it again. But what exactly is lost? And what exactly returns? If reality is fundamental, it cannot disappear. If presence is the condition of existence, it cannot come and go. How could what is fundamental ever be absent? Ibn Arabi lived within a rich intellectual world. Islamic theology, philosophy, and law had developed detailed ways of describing God, creation, and human responsibility. These systems relied heavily on distinctions: creator and created, divine and worldly, eternal and temporal. Ibn Arabi did not dismiss these frameworks. He worked within them, but he also pressed against their deepest assumptions. His primary concern was not ritual or poetry. It was metaphysics. He examined what it means for something to exist at all, and what it means for existence to be known. His writings repeatedly returned to one central insight. Being is one, not symbolically, not metaphorically, but ontological. Why? This claim unsettled many scholars. Because if being is one, then ultimate separation is impossible. And if ultimate separation is impossible, then the idea of true absence becomes incoherent. Why would a thinker claim that absence itself is an illusion? You often feel that something essential is missing. You may describe it as a lack of meaning, lack of depth, lack of connection. This feeling shapes many of your actions. You seek improvement. You seek understanding. You seek completion. But notice what this feeling depends on. It depends on the belief that something is not present. It depends on the belief that reality is partially unavailable. Yet examine your direct experience. Even confusion is present. Even dissatisfaction is present. Even the thought something is missing is present. At no point does experience itself vanish. Only interpretations change. The mind labels certain experiences as absence, but the labeling occurs within presence. You never encounter raw absence. You only encounter experiences interpreted as absence. This suggests a possibility. Absence may not be an experience. Absence may be a concept applied to experience. If absence is conceptual, then the problem may not be lack. The problem may be misinterpretation. Is absence something you encounter, or something you conclude? Ibn Arabi explained that presence is not an object among other objects. It is the condition that allows any object to appear. You cannot step outside to observe it, because stepping outside would still be an experience. An experience already presupposes presence. Doubt appears within presence. Thought appears within presence. Confusion appears within presence. Even the idea that I am not present appears within presence. This means presence is not something added to experience. It is what makes experience possible. You often search for presence as if it were a state. But states change. Presence does not. States appear and disappear within presence. If presence were to disappear, nothing could be known. Nothing could be reported. Nothing could be noticed. the very claimed presence is gone, would be impossible. Can what enables experience ever step outside itself? Ibn Arabi's metaphysics begins with a simple recognition. Being is dot. If something exists, it exists as part of being. There is no separate container called nothingness where things float independently. If beings were composed of multiple independent beings, each would require its own source. That leads to endless multiplication. Instead, Ibn Arabi concluded that only one being truly exists. Everything else is an expression of that one being. Forms appear, relations shift, conditions change, but none of these possess independent existence. They are not separate islands of being. They are modes of the same reality. From this perspective, non-being is not an actual domain. It is a concept used to describe change. If being alone exists, then what you call absence cannot be literal non-existence. It must be a way of interpreting certain appearances. If being alone exists, where could non-being be found? You often speak of awareness increasing and decreasing. You say you are present in some moments and absent in others. But look closely. In moments you label absent, something is still known. Perhaps distraction is known. Perhaps restlessness is known. Perhaps dullness is known. But something is known. Knowing is occurring. If knowing is occurring, presence is occurring. The idea that presence left is an interpretation added afterward. Presence itself never reports its absence. Only thought does. You assume presence arrives when attention sharpens and leaves when attention weakens. But attention is a function. Presence is the ground in which attention operates. You notice fluctuations in attention. You do not notice fluctuations in presence. Who would notice their presence disappearing? What would remain to make such a notice? Ibn Arabi sometimes spoke of reality as hidden, not because it is concealed, not because it is distant, but because it is too fundamental to stand out. Attention naturally moves toward objects, toward thoughts, toward sensations, toward ideas. Rarely does attention turn toward the condition that allows attention itself. Presence does not announce itself. It does not present as a special experience. It is the simplest fact. Because of this simplicity, it is easily overlooked. Not overlooked as missing, overlooked as obvious. You search for something extraordinary. Presence is ordinary. You search for something dramatic. Presence is neutral. The mind expects significance to feel different from ordinary experience. But presence is not different from experience. It is what experience is. Can what is most obvious become invisible through familiarity? The idea that nothing essential is missing can feel unsettling, not because it threatens survival, but because it threatens narrative. Much of identity is built around becoming. You are becoming better, becoming wiser, becoming whole. These stories depend on a sense of INCOMPLETNESS. If nothing fundamental is missing, the story weakens. The mind interprets this as loss of purpose, but purpose does not vanish. Only compulsive striving dissolves. You still learn. You still grow. You still refine understanding. But growth is no longer driven by metaphysical lack. It becomes functional rather than compensatory. The mind resists this shift because it feels like losing a central reference point. What happens to the sense of self when nothing needs to be completed? You may unconsciously think of presence as your awareness, as something you possess. But examine this assumption. Did you create a presence? Did you decide for existence to exist? Did you choose to become aware? Presence was already the case before any thought about ownership appeared. Ownership is a concept. Presence is prior to concept. You say my awareness. But the word my is added later. Presence itself does not carry a label. It simply is. This does not make you disappear. It removes an unnecessary claim. Presence is not personal property. It is the fact of being. If presence existed before any sense of ownership arose, who would own it? Life continues. Tasks remain. Relationships continue. Decisions occur. None of this disappears. What changes is orientation. You no longer live as if something essential must be obtained. You no longer treat completion as a future event. You still improve skills. You still correct mistakes. But these movements occur within wholeness, not toward it. Responsibility remains. Consequences still unfold, but existence is not judged as lacking. This produces a quiet stability, not because circumstances become predictable, but because your sense of being is no longer tied to circumstance. Is stability found by securing experience or by recognizing what never moves. You began with the assumption that presence comes and goes. You end with a question about whether it ever did. If being is one, presence is inherent. If presence is inherent, absence cannot be literal. The search for presence was based on a mistaken premise. Nothing essential was ever missing. Nothing fundamental was ever lost. There was never a moment of outside presence. If what you were seeking has never left, what was ever meant by finding?